In the current backdrop of the geopolitical tensions that we have seen over the last few years, especially in the last 1 year, where Trump has been, hectically involved in a peace process between Russia and Ukraine, and now this deal, one of the clinchers would have been the Russian oil. How do you react to that? Would India have certainly agreed to not buying Russian oil at all with the kind of pace that it had picked up over the last 3 years?
I'm
Yeah,
very
I think
surprised.
India has bowed to U.S. pressure a couple of times in the past, particularly with regard to Venezuela and Iran. So if the threat of U.S. pressure is real, if sanctions, including tariffs, are real, India has shown an ability to kind of move the needle a little bit in terms of where they buy hydrocarbons from. I think specifically, as we talk about what happened most recently. Is it reasonable? Is it feasible? I mean, 7, 8 years ago, India bought almost no hydrocarbons from Russia too, and so it is, to some extent fungible. The big question is, are they going to want to pay the additional fees to be able to do that? Right now, you got about a $10 to $15 per barrel differential from buying Euro crude versus other forms that India would be able to purchase for its refineries. So there's a price to be paid, but India's trade deficit has remained relatively steady. At the same time, its economy has grown, so it is a toll that they can pay if they need to. I think if the prize is big enough, we've seen India bend that needle in the past, and maybe they're going to do so this time. But again, we just don't know. We just have a president's social media message and no response on some of those vital points from the Indian side.
Mr. Rossow, coming to you now, there have been several irritants in the relationship in the last 10 months, particularly apart from the tariffs. There were more than 60 times President Trump coming across and saying that he was the one who brought in peace between India and Pakistan during the 4-day war. Then, of course, the tariffs that were further increased. What are the kind of difficulties that the US-India ties could possibly face up ahead? Because, Trump has been criticized for the not abiding by the rules-based order, in the last few weeks with the kind of operation that was led in Venezuela. And he has changed the dynamics of operations when it comes to diplomacy. A new kind of a Trump diplomacy, or the Trump grammar, if I can say, taking to Truth Social and indicating what his policy decisions really are going to be. But when it comes to a close partner, a strategic partner like India, how difficult would be to take forward this trade deal and perhaps have coordination in other sectors or other, diplomatic fields as well?
I think ties can be restored faster than I think we were thinking a few months ago. I say that because, across India, while there was frustration with, I think, how the Trump administration has handled the India relationship, there's a natural lean and inclination towards the United States. I travel around India, I travel the states, and everywhere you go, policymakers at all levels, they studied here, their kids are here, their economic ties are here. There's so much that kind of binds us together, even if the leaders have some bad days here and there. The negative side, you didn't touch on some of the big ones there too, which is on visas and immigration. That's where,
Yes.
you asked the question about what are some of the areas that might prove tension points in the future. And I think the Republican Party right now still is grappling with this idea about, kind of nativism, but also a lot of the tech companies that have went more deeply into the party that want to make sure that you've got the mobility for high-tech workers. You saw a bit of a slowdown in any students being able to come here because of a freeze on visa appointments a while ago. So I do think there are still some unresolved tensions that Trump is going to have to kind of react to, different wings in the party, hopefully find a balance that won't upset the apple cart too much. But, the good news is that, trade remained remarkably resilient. We actually had substantial growth in goods trade in the last year. Services trade remains pretty strong. And you've got massive investments by a handful of big U.S. companies trying to take advantage of the AI and data center, which, of course, the budget a couple of days ago offers incentives there as well. So a lot of things on the upside. I think you got some bad days between the administrations, but companies oftentimes work on their own accord, and they still choose India when they've got the choice.
On the trade tension that has emerged, but also the geopolitical tension globally over the last 3 to 4 years. One, of course, the Russia-Ukraine war, where Prime Minister Modi has had a kind of a rapport with both Putin and Zelensky. He went to both these countries, met these leaders, and said that this is not an era of war. Solutions cannot be found in the battlefield. Thereafter, on the Israel-Palestine front also, we recently had the foreign minister from Palestine saying that India can play an increasing role in mediating for peace. Then came the Trump Board of Peace invite. Do you think that India, possibly in coordination with the United States, can increasingly play an important critical role as a peacemaker because of the good ties that we have had with all these conflicting countries?
I think that's tricky. I say that because ultimately a lot of these countries, what they want in exchange for listening to global views, they want resources, they want weapons, they want investment, they want trade, they want exports. And India still does not have a lot of development assistance. It doesn't have a strong outbound policy that comes with it, with technology and money. So I think India's tools for pressing tricky partners to the table still remain relatively limited. Beyond, of course, its own views as kind of leading first with peace within its own neighborhood and with a lot of relationships there. So I think the tools are relatively limited. You do see, as you rightly point out, India being seen as relatively close to conflicting players. But at the same time, fortunately, I think with India's a lot of the agreements they've done recently, a lot of the substantive trade policy you've seen partnering with mostly developed countries and partners with the United States, EU, UK, kind of on down the list, Australia, New Zealand, and such. So I think India is at least embedding itself more with partners and allies than it is with those that we look on the other side of geopolitics. But still, nonetheless, India needs a few more tools in the toolkit to bring tricky players to the table to be a key player in resolving disputes, I think.